Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Mike sent me notes, and Steve, check out this story involving a small town in Washington. And he said the name of the town is pronounced Cleelum. Cleelum. So thank you for the pronunciation guide. It's spelled C-L-E, next word E-L-U-M. But from K-I-R-O, Julia Dallas writes that developer hopes to resolve $22 million dispute as Cleelum faces jarring bankruptcy. The town is in eastern Washington. It's facing financial ruin. They're known for their hiking trails and scenic views, and they're also considering bankruptcy, according to the Seattle Times. People look at the Cleelum as a great place to stop and get gas on your way to some other place, says John of the Jake and Spike Show on KIRO News Radio. Cleelum owns a development company more than $22 million, which was awarded by an arbitrator this past November. The town only has a budget of about $5 million for 2025, as shown in a recent report. So if they pay all the money they've got, which will zero them out, they'll still owe $17 million. Now, the man I quoted a second ago who lives in Cleelum spoke with the developer who's putting together this huge project, and what the plan was to buy 354 acres and build 962 new homes, with 40% of the land being open space. And the city was like, yeah, that's a good idea. Wow, look at you stepping up. And that was the plan, was called City Heights. However, work started slowing down, and by 2019, the developer realized that plans were not being facilitated as expected. And so in 2024, an arbitrator awarded the developer around $22 million. According to the arbitration, Cleelum and the developer entered into a contract in 2011 that authorized the project, and in 2011, the parties understood that the housing market was slowly recovering from the 2008 financial crisis, and the market was not ready for the project. Thus, the development agreement authorizes a 25-year build-out period and expressly grants the developer sole discretion to determine when market conditions are ready. So the developer announced is ready to begin development in 2019 after studying the market. However, according to the judge, the town said it was not satisfied with the agreement 8 years into the 25-year-old build-out period. The letter states that town leadership tried to add new conditions to the contract and failed to follow the contract's permitting process, which led to litigation. The mayor told the Seattle Times the town isn't trying to stop the project. However, the media outlet said city leaders have continued to criticize the deal, which now is 14 years old. And one problem leading to this is that during this time period, there was a change in the leadership of Cleelum. The simple bargain of the deal was we would get the benefits of being in the city, which would include sewer and water and some higher density and things. And the benefit that we would get is that all the terms of the agreement were set, so they couldn't be revisited. There were no more negotiations. And so in 2019, when we came in, that set of people said, well, let's see what else we can negotiate out of this. He added this mess has impacted everyone involved, every vendor, I assume he means subcontractor, every bill that's being paid, all the investors that trusted the agreement and trusted me in reading and interpreting the agreement, he said. He said he wants to sit down with city leadership and find a resolution so bankruptcy is avoided. Because obviously, if they get a $22 million judgment, and the city declares bankruptcy, it doesn't really help them. And they're saying, look, we just want to get this thing built. So municipal bankruptcy is a rare event, and it requires an immense amount of transparency. It requires a good faith intent on the municipality to pay the debt in full. It requires a demonstration of a genuine interest in resolving the matter. And so we're looking for the time period when they would come to the table and respond and simply work it out. We could work this out very easily in a short exchange, and that's what we need. So the man says that they haven't offered to sit down with him yet. That's what they're looking for. So the man who's behind the development says that if the project isn't completed, it won't just affect him or his company, but it'll affect everyone in Cleelum. So this is a story that I've heard before in other cities. And so basically, to summarize, make sure this is clear, developer comes up with this idea for a big chunk of land that they've got. And they go, we want to build this big development. And they get approvals from the city. The city says, yes, you can do it so long as you do these following things. Then when the time comes to start this, They're getting ready to start, and the city goes, oh, but we need you to do this, this, and they start adding terms and conditions. It's like, wait a second, we've got a contract. We've got a contract. And unless the contract says that it can be renegotiated later, you stick to those terms. And so the city can, by denying permits or slowing down inspections or doing things like that, can really mess with a developer if they want to. But the question is it something they should do? So I can tell you a story in Michigan. There was a huge development going into a suburb of Detroit. And a guy developer bought a huge chunk of property. And I'm talking about, this is like an hour outside of Detroit, in what used to be farm country. And there's a small town there that grew and grew and grew and grew. And so this developer bought a huge chunk of property right on the edge of town. And they got a development approved. They said, yep, you can put in this many houses, and this is how the streets are laid out, and here's all this stuff. And the developer started doing the development. And there was a change in management, as there often is when there's a new election. The new people come along and they don't like the development. So they go, we need you to make some changes to your development. And the developer goes, like what? They go, we want you to put in fewer houses, take a big chunk out of the middle, put in a park, and give it to the city. It'll be a city park in the middle of your development. The guy goes, that's not part of the contract. I'll lose money if I do that. And no. So they go, okay. So what happens is every time the guy finishes something that needs to be inspected, he calls to get an inspector out there, and it takes a month for the inspector to show up. Or the inspector shows up and goes, yeah, I don't like this. I'll redo it. And it started getting to the point where they realized that the city, behind the scenes, was messing with them in an attempt to basically blackmail them into doing what they wanted them to do. And one of the things they wanted them to do was, like I said, build fewer houses and give the city some property, which is a big ask. And the developer said no. And the developer had a contract. So the developer wound up going bust. They busted out. They went broke. And so they filed a lawsuit against the city in this case, the one I'm talking about here in Michigan. And it went to trial. And a court awarded them a gigantic amount of money. And it was basically the losses they suffered, and also I believe it was lost profits. And the judgment was so large, it didn't bankrupt the city, but it came close. But they had to issue, in essence, like special assessments against every taxpayer in the city to pay this gigantic judgment. And, understand, they filed appeals and all that, and they lost. And there's no question. I actually followed the case very closely because I knew the judge. And I was blown away by some of the testimony that's coming out about what the city was doing to mess with this developer. And so there's an interesting concept. So it's an interesting issue to think about. Is we think of a city. You think of a city and you go, okay, there's a city someplace, Springfield, the city of Springfield. In any state you want it to be in. And there's a mayor and a city council, and they make decisions on behalf of the city. And the mayor retires and a new mayor comes in. Half the city council leaves, another half comes in. It's the same city, but it's completely different people running it. And there is a problem with institutional knowledge. That is what a group of people know. And this happens in legislatures also, where especially in states that have term limits for legislators, it's not uncommon that if legislators are term limited out every couple terms, that there's a completely new group of people in that legislative body. I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm simply pointing this out. That a group of people who are, in essence, all shiny and brand new, who've replaced the group from before, oftentimes someone here will say, hey, let's try such and such. And the old school observers on the outside will go, they tried that 8 years ago. They tried that 12 years ago. They tried, and this new group of people doesn't realize that their new idea has been tried. But here you've got a situation where there's this beautiful little town. Developer comes in, goes, I want to build this big development. We got to time it just right because the economy and whatnot. And the group of people in charge said, yep, that's great. Go ahead, do it. We'll even send a contract. And then the people in charge, there's a turnover. And the new people in charge go, we don't like that deal anymore. It doesn't matter. The people who were here before you liked it, and they were speaking on behalf of the exact same position that you're in. So if you're the mayor or you're the village council member or whatever it is that you are, your predecessor approved this deal. You're stuck with it. So $22 million dispute, and that $22 million is apparently now what the city of Cle Elum owes the company that was doing the development. So it's a wild story, and hopefully they can just use that $22 million figure as leverage to get the deal back into place and back on track. Because I can tell you that the development I told you about earlier fell apart, and I don't think it ever got done. And if you go by there now, I'm pretty certain that there's nothing there. And think about the lost opportunity there, because if the developer had got to put in all the houses, sold all the houses, the property taxes that the city would be getting off that would have been huge. But instead, no houses and tax assessments for everybody in town to pay for the huge judgment. So it's a crazy story. But Mike, thanks for sending that. Developer hopes to resolve $22 million dispute as Cle Elum faces a jarring bankruptcy from KIRO. Julia Dallas wrote that. Questions, your comments, put them below. Otherwise, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. One advantage of talking to yourself is that you know at least somebody's listening.